Hey folks, how you doing? I'm talking about the heaven, and I'm talking about human physiology. I'm talking about the physiology of our planet Earth, and I'm talking about time. Okay, well, all this information, okay, about the things that I just mentioned, was placed in the sky and the constellations by the ancient folks, our ancestors. They put it up there. You know what I mean? So we take the constellation Ursa Major. They call it the Big Bear. They might call it the Big Dipper, but it's the same constellation. The stars in that constellation, hence the seven stars, hence in the Hebrew tradition it was the Elohim, okay, the seven stars, okay, well, they would travel around in a circle, okay, 365 days in a year. So they'd plot out the whole year for us. And so then the people, okay, could just look up in the sky until when the planting season come, when the water season come, the flood season or whatever, and when the harvest season, etc. They could look up in the sky and tell all these things. Okay, and so now we're talking about from the beginning. We also talking about human physiology. Okay, so a person could look up in the sky at the constellations, the heavens, etc., and even talk about how human physiology or how the human would be affected. The human body will be affected certain times of the year. This gets us into the circadian cycles, they call it now, you know what I mean? But this is what the humans were able to do. And once they described the constellations in the sky, okay, now the constellations, the stars are already there. People didn't create the stars, okay? But they could draw lines from each star, okay, in creating a situation, a shape of an animal or whatnot, okay? And so they could tell time by these constellations. They could tell what's going to happen with the human, what's going to happen with the earth, etc. You know, and they lived by it, you know what I mean? And so the God said, you know what I mean, in mythology, now we switched over to mythology, the God said, the way to heaven is through me. And so what he's saying is that it's through his physiology. Because human physiology was replicated in the sky, in its constellations. See, so if you studied the human physiology, okay, you would understand the constellations in the sky. And if you studied the constellations in the sky, you would understand human physiology. Okay? And so our ancestors set it up this way. You know what I mean? And they handed it down from generation to generation by mouth. You know, they told these long stories and everything, their history and all. You know what I mean? Or even in dance and song. Okay, they handed their knowledge down from generation to generation, a knowledge of human physiology, a knowledge of the skies, a knowledge of planet Earth and how it functions, its seasons, etc., and what happened. Okay, so now you see, we see how we can get to heaven if we studied human physiology, and there's ways of doing that. You know what I mean? And the vice versa. So if a person went somewhere, if he understood the stars, and let's say he traveled somewhere around the world somewhere, he could always look up in the sky, you know what I mean, and have information about where he was at and so forth and so on. And the events would occur, you know what I mean, over time. It's sort of like a prophecy, you know what I mean? And that's how prophecies were made, okay? Because the events in the sky occurred repeated. They occurred over and over again. Sometimes it may take many, many years for one event to occur again. But that's all right, you know what I mean, as long as folks knew they had the information. You know, they could go anywhere in the world and know what was going on, what was going to happen, wherever they were at. You know what I mean? Well, that's wonderful. You know what I mean? And so there are many, many constellations. More than the constellations than we have in the zodiac, which we have 12 constellations in the zodiac. There were many more other constellations that told many, many more things. So he said, it's human physiology that gets us into this. It gets us into heaven. The knowledge of human physiology, you know what I mean, is replicated in the heavens. You know what I mean? And so we have many, many constellations, you know what I mean, that are correspond to the body, the human body and its function, and the earth and its function. Okay, so this is what we're talking about when we talk about the heaven. Heaven means knowledge, and heaven. The knowledge, though, H-E-A, is the name here. Is the name of the goddess of knowledge, one of the goddesses anyway, the goddess of knowledge. And van means just that. We put something in the van and we carry it around. And as the constellations in the sky, knowledge is carried around in the van. So they call heaven. Okay, that's why. And so we hear these things, we know these things, we practice these things. So whenever we interpret something, okay, we should practice it. If you interpret it, it means that you know it. And all these things that we interpret, okay, relative to knowledge, etc., then we practice these things in rituals and everything. So all these things are put in the form of rituals so that people can practice them, know them, you know what I mean, and live by them. So here we get into, that takes us into interpretation of the heaven, the way we can live by the heavens. Interpretation of human physiology. We can live by our human physiology, the knowledge of it. You see what I mean? You know, this is what the mythology is about. This is what religion is about. Because religion is actually derived from the mythology. Mythology first, religion came from the mythology, was spread all around the world, and so forth and so on. So we have religions everywhere. The roots of every religion is based in mythology, the African mythology, which goes even beyond the Kemite mythology, okay, because it began around Central Africa. Why? That's where the humans began. That's where we began, you know. And so all these other things began too. They come from knowledge that the people had, okay, thousands of years ago. And believe me, they had the knowledge. They come forth with knowledge. They come forth knowing. They didn't come forth not knowing. You know what I mean? So they came forth, for example, with their energies were consolidated. You know what I mean? Within them. That's knowledge, you know. And so they were able to accomplish these things that I was just talking about. Things about the heavens, things about the earth, things about the human body, etc. You know what I mean? They did these things at first. You know what I mean? And as they migrated throughout Africa, and they migrated to the Lower Nile Valley, or ancient Egypt, okay, they took this information with them. So when the people started off the country, okay, of the ancient Egyptians, they had knowledge. They weren't dummies. They came with knowledge. They came forth knowing. That's how come they was able to build the greatest civilization the world had ever known. You know what I mean? And it lasts for thousands and thousands of years. It wasn't like 200 years or 1,000 years. They were for thousands and thousands of years. You know what I mean? And they had great floods. They experienced 20,000-year floods, really. And when the 20,000-year flood came, it was a flood cycle. They would leave, and their descendants eventually would migrate back. When they migrated back, they had knowledge. They had the knowledge of their ancestors. You know what I mean? And so they started off a great civilization. You know what I mean? So this gives us something about the Sphinx. The Sphinx is probably over 27. It's got to be. It's got to be over 27,000 years old. 27,000 years old. The Sphinx. Yeah, they carved it out of a rock, a stone there in the desert. You know what I mean? We know that it's well over 20,000 years old. And we'll get into that sometime and talk about how we know about the age of the Sphinx. At least the minimum age. It was about 27,000 years old. Through calculations and work done by climatologists, etc., we come to that conclusion. Okay. So anyway, we're talking about the knowledge of the heavens. You know, the knowledge of the heavens is within us. Okay. The knowledge of our planet Earth is within us, all within our physiology. Hence, heaven.